Hey friends, Janky here, and before we get started with today's Janky's Lab, which is going to be super cool, I just wanted to talk to you guys about some format changes that I've been working on and thinking about over the past couple days with Janky's Lab. I really took a minute to think what I was trying to do with this particular series, and what I'm really trying to do with it is show you guys games that are new and cool and they're being worked on and they're awesome, and games that you might not have seen otherwise. And they're games that, in addition to showing them to you, I just kind of want to talk about my opinions on. So, with that in mind, I've kind of reworked Janky's Lab to focus a bit more on gameplay and actually showing you guys what the game is about and what it looks like in action. And I hope you guys like the changes. And of course, if you guys have any opinions on them, I would absolutely love to hear them because that helps me improve my content for you guys. For now, though, just sit back and enjoy the rest of this Janky's Lab. 3, 2, 1. Hey friends, Janky here, and welcome back to the lab. Today, I got a new game for you. This game dropped last week. It looks super awesome. It's called Black the Fall. It was created by a small indie studio known as Sand Sailor Studio, and it is published by Square Enix. So, you know it has to be good because it was published by Square Enix, right? The plot of the game is that after decades of toil, you are an old machinist who is trying to escape communism with the help of a derelict robot, solving puzzles, manipulating the world to get you where you need to go. Is that our character? I'm not sure, but it's going to be exciting, guys. I can't wait to get rolling. Let's do it. Let's get into it, shall we? Alright, let's get this Communist Party started. That's right, friends. I commentate on Janky's Lab now. Look, I didn't think that the pros and cons list was an effective way to talk about the games, just because it's really hard to fit things into pro-con categories sometimes, so I'm trying something new. Anyway, let's talk about this game, shall we? So Black the Fall, by Sand Sailor Studio, published by Square Enix, as I mentioned, is a game all about a cog in a machine finally trying to escape from a communist regime. Communism. Not fun. So, in order to do this, you must avoid both sentry bots and human guards alike. This is accomplished through clever puzzle solving and very, very careful timing. You have to be very good with your timing to make it through this game. Generally, I really like the dark aesthetic, particularly that even with futuristic aspects like the sentry bots and the mind control vests and all that stuff, the game still feels like a slightly aged version of 80s communism, right? It's all cement and wire and Lenin posters everywhere. Honestly, it kind of feels like a jab at Russia. But what I think this game did particularly well with the visual design is visibility. So often whenever these games have these really like dark levels, right? Not dark in terms of like story, but just generally like lighting. It's in this factory. There's not a lot like, it's all fluorescence and terrible lighting. And sometimes whenever that happens, you end up with these really dark levels and it can be difficult to distinguish what's going on. And that's fine if that's what you're going for. In fact, there are some levels in this game that are like purposely like that. You actually can't see what's going on because that's what they're trying to go for in that particular area. But a lot of times whenever games have dark levels, they end up with levels that you can't see what's going on. That's not what they meant in the first place. So that always kind of sucks. But this game did a really awesome job of, even though it was really dark lighting, you could actually still see what's going on. The other thing that I really liked about this game is the use of the three-dimensional perspective and scale. So the game itself is just linear, which means that you can only move forward and backward. You only had A and D, or I was using a controller, so you could only push forward or push backward, and that's all you got. But the levels were built with actual depth. And one of the nice things that the devs improved from the pre-alpha build to the press build, which is what I played here, was the tracking. So I actually played both builds. And one thing that I noticed with the pre-alpha build was that sometimes whenever you were moving in the depth of the plane, the tracking on the ground didn't actually work with what you were doing. There was one area in particular that you're like in sort of a nuclear part of the building, kind of. You're walking across these like catwalks and scaffolding, and there are these planks. And in the pre-alpha build, if you tried to like walk across this plank that was going around a corner, you would constantly fall off if you just tried to walk it. But if you jumped it, you could make it around the curve. Luckily for this press build that I'm playing here, they actually fixed that, which is really nice because I love that it moves in the perspective of the depth of the thing. You know what I'm talking about. The point is, I'm just glad that they fixed the tracking so that even though it's only a forward and backward game, it still feels like you're moving through these scenes really well. And they did some really great things with like far off perspectives and really giving you a sense of like what's going on in this world, and like not even things that are necessarily happening up close to you either, but even things that are happening in the distance, and you're just like, oh, that's so cool that that's there. And it's like you can see that they really thought about what would be happening in the back of this world as you're trying to move through it, which is really awesome. The other thing that I actually really liked in terms of actual mechanics is I just loved. I don't know. I loved everything, guys. Let's just leave it there, shall we? Speaking of the mechanics, let's actually talk about the mechanics of this game. So, obviously, mostly it's puzzle solving, right? There are certain items you can interact with, which are marked by following these flashing yellow and red lights, which I'm sure you've seen already throughout this video here. Basically, it's like you see certain things and they have lights attached to them, and you know that's how you can interact with that thing. Also, usually whenever you come to interactable objects, they'll start flashing or they'll open up or they'll do something specific. There are a couple items that aren't like that, like seesaws and teeter-totters and things. Man, those got me every time whenever I ran into one of those. I was always like surprised and startled. But I think it's because I kind of got in the mindset of, well, if there's a light flashing on it, that must be the thing I interact with, and everything else is just set dressing. Not true. But I like that that's mostly how it's set up because that makes it pretty easy. You're not like wandering around thinking, is there something I should have picked up that I didn't, or something like that. They tend to make it pretty obvious like what's what going on. Usually to get past the cameras and the guards, it all just has to do with careful timing and hiding in plain sight. So for example, I'm sure you've seen in a couple places here, it's like there are these bikes that you hop on and they power these light bulbs, and a lot of times to hide from cameras, you just have to hop on an empty bike and just start pedaling while the camera's looking past you, and then once that camera is done looking at you, you can hop off and keep going. What's really nice about the vision of the guards and the cameras that they did in this game is that it's always marked with a clear red circle around the pool of red light wherever they're looking. So that was actually another difference I noticed between the pre-build and the press build, was that in the pre-alpha build, the cameras and the guards didn't have definitive pools of light, so you were never quite sure if you were out of the vision of the camera or not. That's something that they changed for the press build in the game, which is really nice. It's very clear if you're either seen by the camera or not seen by the camera. And in a game where it's really important to not be seen by the camera and to be able to sneak, I'm glad that they were able to add that in. That changes a bit later whenever you run to bigger bots, because there are some bigger bots farther on in the game, and they can be kind of a hassle to deal with if you're not if you're expecting to see that visual cue. Then those bots can be kind of hard to deal with because they don't have those visual cues. So you just have to know when you're within range of detection by that bot and when you're not. That was the hardest thing I had to deal with those bots, was that I was never quite sure when I was out of their field of vision or not. And they have a pretty wide field of vision. So there's one puzzle right at the end of the build where you run into this bot and you have to sort of sneak around it. You know what? I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it when we get there. But basically, that was just sort of a trickier thing you had to sort of adapt to whenever you got to those bigger bots. There's also an important mechanic using a mind control device you get from a guard early on. So basically, you drop kick this guard, which is absolutely hilarious to watch. Then you loot his body for this pointer thing. And you use the pointer on the other workers that have the control vests on to basically get them to do things you want them to do. It's an interesting mechanic, and they use it in a lot of interesting ways. I think it's the weirdest thing for me about it is that you don't see a lot of repetition in the mechanics from area to area. I mean, there are the basic mechanics like interacting with stuff and, sneaking and crouching and running and all that. But for example, with the pointer, the first time you use it, you just use it to guide a person through a set of switches that you need them to switch on and off, right? And then later on, you run into this person and you're actually in the grating underneath of them. So what you need to do is shine the pointer up through this grating and bounce it off this shiny metal pipe in order to connect with the person. But that's the only area in the game where you actually have to do that. And that might come again later in later parts of the game. But I thought it was weird that they only used that during one section of the game, because I thought it was a really interesting mechanic. And for it only to be in that one part, I thought was kind of weird. The other thing about the pointer is that even whenever you have it, you don't have it for the whole time. It's like after you escape from the factory, which is like the first act of the game. After you escape from the factory, you don't actually have the pointer anymore. You have to recollect it in a different part of the level, which was actually an incredibly confusing part. I got stuck on that puzzle forever because I didn't understand that the thing that I was collecting was the pointer, because I thought I still had it from the level before. And you don't. It's like you just lose it, I guess. I don't know what happens. And that's kind of weird to me, because you'd figure after you grab this power-up thing, you would just have it to use, but I guess that you don't. The one nice thing about the pointer, though, is that they were able in the press build to get it working with the controller, which was something that they didn't have in the pre-build, which sucks because I like trying to play games with the controller whenever I can, because I think that, not to say that every person who plays games on PC likes using controller, but I have noticed that there are a lot of people who like playing games on a PC but still using a controller. Obviously not with like first-person shooters or anything like that, because those are so much easier with a mouse and keyboard, but it's fun to play it with a controller, so I like to try to do that whenever it's possible. In the pre-build, I couldn't, because that main mechanic with the pointer didn't work with the controller. But for the press build here, they got it working, which was super nice. I'm glad that they got that feature working, because it's a real good feature, and I like using it. The other thing about the pointer, too, is that you actually use it later whenever you run into your cute little insect dog companion guy. Oh my god, it's adorable, guys. He's precious. He is super duper fresh. You'll love him. He's so cute. He's adorable. And he's a main mechanic in the game too, which is super cool. But we'll get to him again in just a second. The last thing that I wanted to say about mechanics was that even though the game kind of changes up the mechanics on you a lot sometimes for like different areas, the nice thing is that there's always a sign that's going to tell you what you need to do. So if it's a thing where it's like, okay, here you need to crouch, there's usually some kind of sign that says, hey, to sneak you need to crouch, and that's what crouching does, is it lets you sneak. Or this is a part where you need to take a running jump at it, and there'll be a sign that shows someone like running and jumping. Or like, you just need to run here, and there'll be a sign with a person just running. And obviously this isn't for every puzzle, because usually after a mechanic is introduced, they won't show you the sign again. But every time that it's like a first use for a particular mechanic, they show you a sign there. A great example is at the end of the factory level. There's a part where the entire level is actually staged in the dark. And there are these steam pipes, and if you run into the steam, you die. But you can hear the steam, and it gets louder the closer you get, so it's all about listening with your headphones. And basically you just have to wait until you think you're close to the steam, and then when the steam turns off, run. But don't run too much, or else you might run into the next steam jet. And it was a really interesting mechanic, and I really liked that area of the game. I thought that was really cool, and it's just nice that they give you that heads up beforehand so you know what's coming before it comes. I thought that was nice of them. That's a good mechanic to have, so your gamers don't get super frustrated over the fact that things keep changing and I hate it. But no, it's really cool. Okay, so let's move on to the adorable little robot dog that you play with. He's so cute. Let's talk about him. So, this companion robot, he's adorable. The trickiest thing about him is that he moves in 3 dimensions. So whereas you can only move left and right in the game, he can actually move up and down in the plane of the game. Which it's important that he does, because if he gets in your way, you'll actually just knock him out of the way. Which I learned the hard way, because there's a particular part toward the end of the build where you run into more steam pipes, and the way you get past them is you get your robot dog companion to block off the steam. And then he's blocking the steam so that you can jump past these pipes. The issue that I was having was that I jumped to the first platform and I knocked him out of the way because he wasn't out of my plane. And I knocked him out of the way of the steam, and the steam killed me. So it's important that he's able to move in that plane. It's just sometimes kind of tricky to figure out where to put him, because you don't want him in your way, and you're not sure if he's actually like in your way, or if you need to like set him out away from you, or I don't know. It's just kind of a tricky mechanic, particularly because you're stuck in one plane and he can move in multiple planes. So I mean, that's just a small little thing, but it's important to the gameplay. The other nice thing about him is that you can actually change him into a stand that you can use for climbing and a couple other things in the game, which is very helpful. And the nice thing is that even though you have this extra character that's introduced into the game to kind of help you along, usually whenever you play puzzle games with 2 characters, you have to worry about both of them. Like, one of them might make it through the puzzle, but then the other one is stuck in the last room, so you have to find a way to get him through too. That's actually not a problem that you have to worry about with this companion, because as long as you get through the puzzle, he can actually maneuver around the environment to get back to you. So you don't really have to worry about him and if he's in the correct place, because as long as you get through, he will follow you, which is nice. And it's cute. He's just a cute little robot dog companion, guys. He's adorable. So, those are all of my thoughts on Black the Fall. Let's conclude with bringing out the old Janky's experimental scale, shall we? Yes, that's right. There's still a conclusion section, if just to wrap things up with a little scale. As you no doubt recall, there are 5 possible rankings: smashing success, promising results, more trials needed, revisions required, and acid kid. I am happy to say that with a dark story, challenging puzzles, and an adorable companion, I have no trouble giving Black the Fall a promising results. I hope you all agree, but if not, feel free to leave your opinions below. For now, I am going to call this experiment concluded. So, I hope you guys enjoyed yet another Janky's Lab. If you did, you can leave those likes down below. As I just said, comments positive or negative, feel free to leave those below as well. More than anything, I hope you have a lovely day, evening, or whenever you happen to be watching. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this is Janky Shenanigans, signing out.